Matthew Maley looked invincible on a football field. Number 22 could take the simplest route and turn it into a touchdown.
Matthew was the gift of God. It's the biblical meaning.
Matthew was Sandra Maley's youngest child, her only son. He grew up in a small village in Wyoming County. Matthew graduated from Letchworth High School in 2011 as one of the top athletes in his class. Sandra started to notice problems in her son after his senior year. Sports were over.
He just seemed like he didn't know what to do with himself. He had no more structure, and I would go home from work and he'd be laying on the couch or laying in bed, which wasn't like Matthew.
Growing up in Albion in the 1950s, Lee Manier's sport was baseball. His favorite team was the St. Louis Cardinals. Lee first met his wife in 3rd grade, and it blossomed from there.
Our first formal date was the junior prom, and I can remember when he brought me home, gave me a quick kiss at the door, and I walked in the door and I leaned back against my kitchen door and I said, I want to marry that man.
Lee and Meredith then had a daughter, Marissa.
I had a lot of friends who saw him as another dad because he was just so much fun.
Lee seemed happy on the outside. You know, he smiled. You look at all his family pictures, he was smiling in all of his pictures.
In 2004, he walked his daughter down the aisle at her wedding. These were the happiest moments, the moments when Lee could hide what he was fighting against. Just as there were moments, like in his football highlights, when Matthew Maley could hide what he was fighting against.
Sometimes boys, I think, have that pride where they don't want to ask for help.
Matthew died of suicide in 2011, 5 days after his 18th birthday. He was just weeks away from starting community college.
He really was a great kid.
Lee Manier died of suicide in 2007 at the age of 57.
Not only did I lose a father, I was only 25 when he died, but it's taken away grandfather, for my daughter. And having to watch my mother go through that was probably the hardest part.
Lee's family and Matthew's family, both from rural western New York, and they now share the same pain along with thousands of other families. Suicide killed almost 5,000 people in the state of New York and more than 500 in western New York alone between 2011 and 2013, the latest 3-year period available from the state's Department of Health. But this public health problem is especially urgent in rural counties. The rates in all of western New York's rural counties hover well above the state average. Matthew Maley's home of Wyoming County doubled the state average.
There are residences that are very isolated.
Brandy Rajak Winter is the coordinator of the Wyoming County Suicide Prevention Coalition. The coalition launched under the county's mental health department about a decade ago. Its goal is to let people know how to get help, and the demographic most at risk is middle-aged men.
In rural communities, people are very private and they're also very prideful. And so they don't often reach out to others when they might be feeling unwell.
In about 90% of cases, suicide is related to a diagnosable mental illness. And in rural counties, people sometimes have to travel longer distances to get professional help. This is a national trend as well. The rural states of Montana, Alaska, and New Mexico had the highest suicide rates in 2014. Research from Ohio State University conducted over the past 2 decades revealed that teenagers in rural areas like Matthew Maley have double the rate of suicide compared to urban teenagers.
It's almost maybe a cultural issue, these barriers that they face.
Tracy Rayner is a psychiatric nurse practitioner who works with patients in rural western New York. She blames the problem on lack of transportation and lack of awareness about where to turn for help.
It's looked at as such a bad thing, but it's a real illness that they're dealing with, and they're in so much despair that they need help. And what people need to know is they can get help.
And we need to look at it as a disease, and we cannot be ashamed. If we need help, we need to ask for it.
Sandra noticed problems in her son after he graduated high school, but Lee Manier's pain spanned many years.
He had very high standards for himself that he felt he never could live up to, and those were hard things for him to deal with. It got worse as he got older.
Marissa and Meredith are now central figures in the Orleans County Suicide Prevention Coalition.
This coalition gave me a voice to help somebody else.
We've made it our mission to try to help erase that stigma. And in this small town, it starts with your friends and family.
In the Maley family, suicide cost Matthew his future.
I still like to talk about him. I like to bring up his name. Anybody that talks to me, they just never seem to bring up his name, and it's okay. We need to talk about these things.
And that way, the lives of Matthew Maley and Lee Manier will help spark this crucial conversation in rural Western New York.